The Israelites left Babylon, many returning to Jerusalem, and some heading to surrounding countries. An Israelite named Mordecai moved to a country called Susa with his adopted daughter Esther. While they were there, the king of Susa, Xerxes, was looking for a woman to become queen. Young women from all over Susa, including Esther, were brought to live in the king's palace and go through a year of beauty treatments before the king would make his selection. When Esther finally got to meet King Xerxes, he was attracted to her more than any of the other women. So Xerxes placed a crown on Esther's head and made her queen. But Esther did not tell him that she was an Israelite, also called a Jew, because Mordecai asked her not to, fearing his reaction. One day, Esther's father Mordecai was sitting near the king's gate and overheard two of the king's officers planning to kill the king. So he warned Esther, and Esther told King Xerxes. The king's life was saved, and the two men were executed. Shortly after, King Xerxes promoted one of his men, named Haman, to a position higher than all the other officials. He commanded everyone to bow down as Haman entered each day through the king's gate, but Mordecai refused. When Haman saw this, he was furious and even more angry when he found out from some of his officials that Mordecai was an Israelite. So he looked for a way to kill not only Mordecai, but all of the Israelites living in Susa. He convinced King Xerxes to declare a law stating that all Israelites living in the region would be killed on a specific day because they would not follow the king's laws. When Mordecai heard about the law, he tore his clothing and wept bitterly. He convinced Esther to go before the king, reveal that she was an Israelite, and ask the king to spare her people. There was one problem. No one, not even the queen, was allowed to come before the king uninvited. If they did, they risked being put to death. But Esther was brave and approached the king, who asked, "What is your request?" Esther said that she wished for the king to host a banquet and to make sure that Haman, the man who wanted to kill the Israelites, was there. At the banquet, she would make her request known. When the day of the banquet came, everyone, including Haman, was there. The king asked Esther what it was that she wanted. She revealed that she was an Israelite, a Jew, and begged for her own life and the lives of her people. The king was furious with Haman, who had convinced him to create the law and had him arrested and killed. Then King Xerxes not only removed the law to kill the Israelites, but gave all of them living in the region protection and rights. Because of Esther's bravery, the Israelites were spared and even honored.
Who knows, maybe you're here for such a time as this. 9:25, Sunday, February 11th, at Main Post Chapel in Schofield Barracks. We've been going through this story. We're on week 20. I don't know about you. Some of you are like, it seems like it's been forever. Some of you are, well, what's the story? What we've been trying to do over the last 30 weeks or so, because we took a break for over Advent, is really giving you some snapshots of the story of God. Starting at the very beginning in Genesis and working our way through to show you where not only do those snapshots, those unique Bible stories that you learned probably as a kid or you've heard of, oftentimes we have these in our mind, but we don't see how they all fit together. We also don't always see how it fits together for a purpose, of God's larger purpose. Today I wanted to we've given you lots of resources. So we have a Bible study on Wednesday. We've been going through, every week we've had kind of that Sharpie video. Has the Sharpie video been kind of helpful for you? Right? It just kind of takes the story and it condenses it some. as you start reading, there's other details. You're like, wait, it didn't talk about it in the video, or there's some unique nuance. Even in the story today, the relationship between Mordecai and Esther, it's like, was it an uncle? Is it an older cousin? But either way, as you dig into the story, it's an adopted daughter relationship. So there's unique nuances when you read the story, when you see it from the video there. And then I want to introduce you to a new resource. And I wanted Eden to come up and help me out. How many of you have a Bible app on your phone? Maybe YouVersion. It's got a little Bible. But there's another one. Come on, stand up. There's another one called Bible for Kids, and it has a little cartoon head of Jesus. It's Bible for Kids by YouVersion. And I want to show you, especially if you want to review, you can go through all of these stories and kind of see how it fits together. So Bible for Kids, we want to show you Esther today. Let's see.
The brave and beautiful queen.
Okay. So it's got a map. As you go through, there's various stories. And as you go ahead and, let's go back. You're good, wait. And then we'll click on Esther, which is the one here. Okay? Okay? And we hit read. And you can click and then the words will go back away. And you can kind of touch on different things. It's kind of interactive. Can you turn it up just a little?
Very proud. Everyone except Mordecai bowed down to him. Haman was insulted. He vowed to kill Mordecai and all the Jews.
He's like, I'm not bowing down. And then you kind of work through it. You can keep going to the next. Yep.
Haman told Xerxes that the Jews were dangerous and should
And then there's little like questions as you go along. So click on question. Haman wanted to kill Jewish people. True or false? True, right? All right, continues on. Okay, and you can click around. There's kind of different things that happen. If you click in the fruit, I think something jumps out. Let's see. All right, there we go. And then we can go on to the next. And there's different things hidden within. The jewel, so you click on the jewel, right? The diamond?
I clicked it.
Okay. All right, you found the Bible gem. Hit the X. We'll continue on. Okay. Who told Esther to change the king's mind about killing the Jews? And you kind of see who it is. There we go. Continue on. Yep. All right. All right, they're partying. All right.
So Haman was hanged on the gallows he built for Mordecai. Because of Esther, the Jews were saved. They celebrated with a great feast, which
Got it.
they observed to this
Yep. All right. And then go next. And then there's also, so the last one, God allowed Esther to be the queen at this time to save the Jewish people. True. And it builds up sort of, you build up, I guess, points in a sense as you learn the stories and you get awards. You can take that with. Actually, I'll take it so you can listen to the sermon. Thanks. So there's also under each of the snapshots or the stories, there's also sort of a game. Sometimes there's a matching game that you can play, and sometimes there's a coloring game. There's different kinds of stuff, but there's similar to how we're going through the story. On the app, you can go through. It's a free app you can download. But again, it tells you the story. It becomes somewhat interactive. But here's the key. As we look at these uniquenesses of these stories, too oftentimes we get so focused on the lower story and those details that we fail to see the upper story. Does that make sense? You guys remember we talked about upper story, lower story. So there's the lower story snapshot of all the details going on, and then there's the upper story of what's going on with God. The unique part about even the book of Esther is that God is never mentioned in the book of Esther. Some people have even said, why is Esther even in the Bible? And I think even though God's not mentioned, we see the fingerprints of God throughout the entire story. So as you look between the upper and the lower story coming together, you begin to see the details. So there's a lot of details between the Bible app story, the whiteboard story, as well as probably what you read in the book of Esther. But there's a few things I just want to highlight today. I think what we understand is Esther and Mordecai are God's key players within the story, but God himself stands as the sovereign hero of history. God's never explicitly referenced, but his evidence of his presence and power and protection are throughout. When I think of this concept of, even though God's not actively, right, he didn't show up like the fourth man in the furnace. He didn't show up in the burning bush, but did he show up in the sovereignty of this story, the uniqueness of how Esther was put in a place for such a time as this, to begin to work and save the Jews. As I think of this, I think of John chapter 3 when it talks about when Jesus is talking to Nicodemus and he says, you don't always see the wind, but you can see the effects of the wind, right? You hear it and you see the way it goes. I think what I want you to hold on to today when you think about the sovereignty of God or God's work in your life, that you don't always see it. You don't always hear God's voice, but his actions are all throughout your life. The idea that I want you to hold on to is this. When you feel helpless, when you feel hopeless, know you've got a purpose. When you feel hopeless, know that God's at work and you've got a purpose. I think that's maybe the key idea through this story, but I think multiple stories. But think about this story, friends. I mean, you've read it, you've heard it before, you saw it a couple different ways, but it's kind of a weird story. Like most of Bible stories, as you dig into details, you're like, what? You read, it's like the queen, the original queen, was supposed to come out and parade herself during a drunken party. I mean, that wasn't told in these, but as you read, it's like, original queen was supposed to come and dance around at a drunken party and said, no, I'm not going to do that. So then she was sent away. And then a new queen was supposed to be found, and let's find a beauty queen. And then now let's go all over the entire empire, and let's do 1-year beauty treatments to decide who's coming to be the next queen. So like this beauty pageant, really? And then Esther's the one that's chosen to be like Miss Universe, right? And then she comes in and takes the queen. I remember a chaplain that I met when I was at chaplain school. He was the chief of chaplains for Sierra Leone. Now, Sierra Leone is like, if you've seen the movie Blood Diamond and some of the other issues, he was the chief of chaplains for Sierra Leone. He was a child soldier, and he talked about some of the atrocities that happened between the different tribes. And here's why he was the chief of chaplains. Here's the reason. Because the dictator killed the previous chief of chaplains. Right? So imagine Esther. It's like, hey, I'm the queen, kinda, because I won this beauty pageant, because the king is sort of a crazy dictator and got rid of the last queen because she wouldn't come out and dance in front of all of his friends. Right? There's layers to this. You're going, what? And as I think of these layers, and the reason why I'm honest, I think the truth is that Esther's not the hero. Mordecai's not the hero. Who do you think the hero is of this story? Not Xerxes. God. And that's what I want you to realize as you look at the stories of the Bible. There's some weird stuff. It's not like God's going, yeah, this is how you should have a wife. Just go and have a beauty pageant. And right? No. It's not like God's going, this is how it's supposed to work. He's saying that's what's happening. There's rights, there's injustices, there's all kinds of things in this world. But guess what? When you feel worthless, you've got a purpose. And oftentimes we forget about the purposes of God within the individual lives. Did King Xerxes put worth on certain people? No, not really. But did God, the King of heaven and earth, even though people were away from Jerusalem in Susa, no one even knew Esther was a Jew. But as difficulties came, when they said, you don't matter, what happened? She came at that place for that purpose at that time, for such a time as this. When I think of this idea of purpose and hopelessness, my favorite psalm I want to share with you, there's a lot of them that are wonderful, but one of my favorites is this, Psalm 139. And it talks about this fingerprints of God. It talks about how God is in control. And it says, "Oh Lord, you've searched me and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You're familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you knew it completely, Lord. You hem me in behind and before. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain." I want you to think of our point today. I want you to think about Esther's story, and I want you to think about what is it saying about God. When you feel worthless, know you've got a purpose. Worthless. Not that it's like, I'm nothing, but we feel like we're worth less. If you feel like you're not as important, there's not a point, there's not a purpose, begin to realize that God is at work and you do have a purpose. Listen, here's what he says, "Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go to heavens, you're there. If I make my bed in the depths, you're there. If I rise in the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me." Continues on, it says, "I praise you." Or verse 13, "For you created my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, I know that full well." And it continues on, but as I think about this story, I think of Esther's example to see that God calls his people to fearfully risk what's right. The verse I want to highlight, that's one you've heard before, but I want you to think about. In the story, it's on page 282, or it's in Esther chapter 4, verse 12. So I want you to see, in the midst of the entire story, there's this tension. There's Haman who hates Mordecai, and because he hates Mordecai, he just doesn't want to kill Mordecai. He wants to kill all of Mordecai's people, ethnic cleansing. So he decides he's going to sneak in a rule that's basically saying, hey, let's just kill all the Jews. He doesn't realize that God is at work and has a purpose and was able to get the most influential person in some ways, and in other ways, not so much, Esther to be this queen, sort of the inside person. There were other things that were at play where, you remember, it's mentioned there as well as in the reading, Mordecai saved the king's life. There's sort of these unique fingerprints at work. And when this happens, Mordecai's like, hey, now's the time, I need your help. If not, all of us are going to die. Esther comes back and says, I can't do this. If I go before the king, he could kill me. They're passing these notes. They're talking, right? Esther's like, nah. The king, you know the king. He's not a good person. If I come in, I could die. And here's what it says. Esther's words were reported, page 282 or Esther 4:12. Esther's words were reported to Mordecai. He sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. What's he saying? Hey, you're in this too. Just because you're quiet doesn't mean you get out. And then he pushes it forward. And here's what I want you to hold on to today. And who knows? But that you've come to your royal position for such a time as this. Then Esther sent a reply to Mordecai, go gather all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days or nights, and I and my attendants will fast as well. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it's against the law, and if I perish, I perish. You see? She's like, I can't do it. Mordecai's like, fine. If you don't do it, we got no hope. But you know what? God will come through even if you don't. But who knows? Maybe you're here for such a time as this. She's like, okay. Let's fast, let's pray, and then we'll act. As I think of this story, it's encouraging, it's inspiring. I think that it's this strange story, right, with unique complexities, but think about our own stories. The twists and turns and the way, all of the different things that the twists and turns of our life that brought us even here today. You're like, yeah, if I was to blast it up as a little kid's video game, it would be kind of complex too. And there would be some things that don't make sense and maybe don't connect. But that's because we're focused so much on this lower story, we don't realize that God's fingerprints have been at work in each of our lives to bring us to this moment. For such a time as this. And if we're honest, friends, we say, no, it's just Sunday afternoon. Or is it? And who knows? Maybe you're here for such a time as this. This week, I recently started some advanced education, and this week we had to do a study on UN human rights and looking at the responsibility and stewardship of leadership. As I was preparing the message, and I'm thinking, there's so many complexities in this world. And there's so many ways that we just kind of take a seat, right? We take a seat back and we allow others to do things. Why? We're good at complaining, but will we actually step in and do? And you realize, well, have you ever been there where you sit back and you're like, somebody should do something about that? And the question is, what about you? Right? Even just over this last week, sort of a snapshot. Right? Last week was Super Bowl. So we sit back, we watch a game, yeah, ooh, boo, whatever. But we're not in the game. We're watching, we're eating some food and making fun of the commercials or whatever else. Well, if they would have done this instead of that, well, let's stop. What about us? For such a time as this, your life is more important than any football game. Your purpose and plan in this moment right here is more important than anything. I even thought there was a fun thing that we got to do this week. Susan and I went to on the set of Hawaii Five-0, and we got to meet like the characters and some different stuff, and it was so cool. But it's like we're sitting behind like the cameras of a dumb TV show. Was it fun? Yes. But your life and your purpose is so much more important than sitting behind the cameras, watching someone else act in saving the world of Hawaii, right? If you ever watch Hawaii Five-0, you're like, wow, I didn't realize Hawaii was so dangerous, right? And it's like, yeah, and you talk to Steve, and it's like, hey, Steve, and I was joking with him. He walked out. I'm like, hey, I'm so glad you're keeping Hawaii safe, right? And it's this movie. But if we think about it, we don't put this. We believe that we're second-string actors to a world where other people matter more. Think about the story of Esther. Really, an orphan girl who wins a beauty pageant? Who is sort of the queen, but not really? And if she goes before the king to actually do something, she could die. And she's got somebody like Mordecai that says, you know what? Maybe you're here for such a time as this. And you're encouraged by other stories you've heard about other people who stepped up, like Abraham, who's like, you know what? I'm going to leave everything. Or like Moses said, yeah, I'm a murderer. And yes, I felt like I was worthless, but you know what? God had a purpose. And you go, oh, there were these three guys that were in a furnace, but guess what? When they went in the furnace, the fourth one showed up. And there's this story after story after story. My challenge for you is that you wouldn't sit back and say, it really doesn't matter. I'm not a professional athlete. I'm not a movie star. I'm just me. You've got a purpose. Now, so here's what I want to give you today. As I think of this story, there are these three takeaways or signposts, and here's what I think it is. When we understand the sovereignty of God, you have a place, a purpose, and a plan. So it's this, the first one, I just have some image that I want to show you. The first is a place. This idea of location. Where you are matters, right? You are in this place. So stop trying to wish you were somewhere else. Where you are matters. If we believe that God's sovereignty is real, then where you are right this instant actually matters, and you can make a difference in this world. You look to the left and the right. Look at the people around you. You are interacting with them, whether you like it or not, for good or bad, right? For such a time as this. There is a location to you. God put you in a body, in a time, in a place, in a location, and it matters. So many times we're like, but next week I'm going to be somewhere else. That's next week. This moment, you are right here. Own that. You feel worthless? It's like, I wish I could be somewhere else. You're not. I wish I could have a better preacher. Okay, that's somewhere else. But right here, in this moment, it's our time. It's a short moment of encouragement, of reflection, of presence, where we go, okay, God, what do you got for me? You are in charge of this world, and help us to understand how we interact. So first, it's understanding these signposts of God's sovereignty. His place. Own it. Where are you at? That's the question. Where are you at? Oh, I remember, actually I don't remember, when I got knocked out and I had amnesia after an airborne operation. I remember waking up in the hospital and the nurse looking at me, this male nurse, I still don't remember his name, but he would poke me like this and go, do you remember? You know where you're at? I'm like, no, looks like a hospital. Do you remember your name? Yeah, my name's Brandon. The only thing I could remember was my childhood phone number. Right? Like, here's my childhood phone number. My name's Brandon. I have no idea why I'm here. And this guy would go, what's my name? And he'd introduce himself. My name's John. I'm like, okay, John. And then he'd come back and say, what, do you remember my name? I'm like, no. But sometimes in life, we get like this spiritual amnesia where we don't know where we are. We don't know who we are, and we don't know why it matters. And I'm here to say to you, it does matter. When you feel worthless, God's got a purpose. First one is place. You look around. Where are you at? And know that it matters. Where are you at? It does matter. Think of your job, your family, your proximity. Look around. See the needs. The second slide is just this idea of purpose. So first signpost is place. Second is purpose. And the second concept is this question of who are you? Who are you? Why does your life matter? And don't answer it doesn't, because it does. It's this idea of function. What difference do I make in this world? It's a question you need to ask. You may want to write it down in your bulletin. First was place. Second is purpose. Function. Who are you? What do you love? What are you paid to do? What are you great at? What does the world need? When you begin to ask that question, somebody needs to do something about it. Look in the mirror and realize that God maybe put you here for that. Maybe God put you here for that. First signpost is place, location. Where are you at? Second is purpose or function. Who are you? What do you do? What upsets you? What can you do or fix? How do you get in the game? The third one is this, it's plan. So we got place, purpose, plan. You've got location, function. The last one's direction. So the issue isn't, it's, okay, I got it that I'm here. I got that I'm a dad and I'm the brigade chaplain and I help out with the chapel, and there's this aspect of location and owning that I'm in Hawaii and not somewhere else, right? The second one is going, purpose. There's something that, I am here for a reason. If the world did not have me or you, something would be missing. Now I want you to hold on to that, because some of you don't believe that. Some of you honestly don't believe that, but if you were not in this world, something would be missing. I want you to hold that. Even if you don't believe it, I want you to hold on to it, and this week even ask, what would be missing, God? What would be missing if I was not here? And the third one is the plan or direction. What do I do now? What do I do next? If I understand that I'm important to people around me in this place, in this time, if I realized that if I wasn't here, something would be missing, the next question is action. It's what do I do now? Right? Esther had to get up and have some courage and do something. A story I heard from John Ortberg said this. He was telling a story about his friend. He said, one of my friends, and you may relate, you ever had a situation, it's like, what do I do? Where do I go? What do I do now? When you know what you're supposed to do, but you don't want to do it, right? If you're like me, you either sit in the shower and you just wish you could stay in the shower forever, right? You're like, I don't want to get out of the shower. Or sleep or something else to avoid either the person or the situation. So he tells about his friend who's on a walk with his wife, and he keeps talking. He says, every time I think about making this decision, my mouth gets dry. And then he's telling about the situation with his wife as they're walking. And then he says, every time I think of the situation, my palms get sweaty. And I don't want to do it. He goes on and on. He's talking, they're walking. My mouth gets dry, my palms get sweaty. And his wife turns to him and says, you know what? Maybe you should lick your palms. And John says, his friend's like, what? You're supposed to be encouraging. And she says, maybe you should stop talking about it. Maybe you should do something about it. And John's point was, for some of us, and maybe for me, maybe it's palm licking time, right? There's times when our mouth gets dry and our palms get sweaty, and maybe God's given us both so we can lick our palms and go and do something. You're here in a place. You've got a purpose. There's a plan. Now you've got to do something about it for such a time as this. The last slide, there's just a crown. And I want you to think about, and who knows, but you've come to your royal position at such a time as this. We think, oh, Esther's the queen, she's in a royal position. No, friends, here's the deal. You're in a royal position. God's given each of us crowns and authority and a difference and a plan in our life. And the question I have for you is, what will you do with it for such a time as this? Friends, it's our time. I want you to reflect on those signposts, the location, that function, the direction for such a time as this. Let's reflect, and I've got a brief video, and then we'll sing.